Hi, this is Elizabeth Clare Brewington with Discover Brightside, where we discover new things. And wherever you are, we hope you will subscribe and enjoy this great story that we have in store for you. So, if you love baking and if you're new to baking and you're planning to bake this holiday season, you really, really want to hear what we have to say. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Carolyn. She is the founder of Mighty Delicious. Don't you love that name, Mighty Delicious? So, Carolyn, share your story and tell us all about Mighty Delicious.
Sure. Hi, I'm Carolyn Haler. I'm the founder and CEO of My Delicious. I was diagnosed with celiac disease in 2012 when I was 31 years old. So I had lived a very gluten-full life up until that point. I'd had the opportunity to live and study abroad, and I'd eaten all of the pastry and the pasta and the croissants and all the things that, really make life sometimes very enjoyable. And being diagnosed at such a late age is very different from being diagnosed as a child. And as I was sort of dealing with this diagnosis and learning how to heal my body with food, which is what sort of I needed to do, I realized that a lot of the products on the market that were being marketed to people with celiac disease or gluten intolerance or digestion issues were really created by parents for children. And there is a lot of love and a lot of sympathy in these products. However, there isn't a lot of empathy because it's very, very hard for an adult who's not gluten-free to empathize with someone who is. And that's just because they haven't had to live it. And it's also very, very hard to see the world through your adult child's eyes if they're still a child. And so what I realized was that these products are really lacking in a few key areas: taste and texture, which are two of the most important things. Obviously, I only want to eat things that are good for my body and healthy for my body and aren't going to make me sick. But I also was working in finance, was getting up at 4 in the morning, working out by 7, being at work at 7:30, working until the sun set and then coming home. And food and what you eat becomes a really important part of just managing your everyday life. Like, I'm sure there's lots of people who have had a hard day at work and have been like, just gonna have a cold glass of beer, right? That's a normal ceremonial process that an adult will go through that a child wouldn't go through. Of course, if you have celiac disease, you can have beer. You can't have soda because there's gluten in caramel color. So Pepsi Cola, Coca-Cola, even ginger ale has gluten in it. And so you suddenly realize that many of the ways that you manage your stress, that you cope with your life, that are really small, like having a Diet Coke or a Coke at 3 o'clock is not a big ceremonial thing. But when that is taken away from you, you realize how important it was to you, especially when it's all these little things. Like, I can never just grab, if I'm late for work, I can never just grab a bagel. That a lot of the convenience that has been built into our food is gone. And so I was sort of living in this world of products that were made for children, but needing an adult product, something that would satisfy my needs as an adult, my experience with food, because I knew what food should taste like, that was also good for me and that would not cause me any harm. And I just realized one day, I was like, it's not going to happen. I was like, it's just not. It was 5 years. It was 2017. I was like, I was tired. It was the holiday season. I'd been working crazy hours. I was shopping for Christmas presents. I hadn't eaten all day. I was sad. It was like cold out. I was just having a bad day. I was sad and tired and hungry. And so I grabbed this package of gluten-free cookies off of the shelf and took a bite, and I hadn't even purchased them yet. I'm still waiting in line to buy my Christmas gifts. And it was so bad, I didn't even finish the cookie. I put it back in the bag. And I had to buy them, and then I threw them out on the way out of the store. Like, they didn't even come home with me. They were that gross. And I was just like, that's it. I'm gonna make a gluten-free cookie that tastes good. And that was really the beginning. I spent about 6 months figuring, like, just testing recipes, realized, but one of the reasons there isn't good baking out there is that the technology doesn't exist, that most people are just adapting recipes that are made for gluten. and that you can't bake that way. That does not work. That their products for gluten-free flour really didn't exist, that they were taking products that were made for cooking and then saying, oh, well, you can eat rice. So here's this rice flour that's made for cooking, and now you can bake with it. You can't. You can't. There's baking is chemistry, and there's a lot of that goes into baking that isn't the same as cooking. Cooking is a little bit more artistic, it's a little bit more flexible. You have to follow a baking recipe to the T to make it come out the same every time. And I sort of just came up with some recipes. Finally, after like 6 months of testing and coming up with my own recipes, starting with other people's recipes, realizing they wouldn't work. Coming up with my own recipes, I took some samples, and I live in Manhattan. I walked into the Whole Foods that's here on the Upper East Side, and I was just looking for feedback on the product, sort of a prototype. And I was like, I make gluten-free cookies. And they're like, oh, go talk to Chris behind the bakery counter. I was like, okay. I was like, hey, Chris. And he was behind the cakes. And he goes, oh, I'm the team leader here. I was like, I make gluten-free cookies. I'm a baker. And he was like, oh, I'll try them. He's like, I'm the team leader here. I was like, okay. I don't know what that meant at the time. He tasted them and he goes, that's the best gluten-free cookie I have ever tasted. He was like, take your cookies down to Union Square into Brooklyn. We sell more gluten-free products than any Whole Foods like in the country. If we email the regional office all together at the same time, ask for the team leader. I was like, okay, team leader, got it. They will, they might onboard you. We have like a regional local supplier program. This was on a Thursday, and I was being onboarded to Whole Foods by Monday. And that was my, yeah, that was my go-to-market. I was just baking cookies in my 24-inch New York City oven, right? Like I had no production capacity. I didn't have any licenses. You need a food handler's license. You have to register with the state. I had to form an LLC. I had to find a commercial kitchen that had the right licenses. Fortunately, onboarding into these big retailers takes a long time. It takes from 3 to 6 months. And this was in July, I believe. And I was officially on the shelves by January of the next year. So it did take a full 5 months. But that was the beginning. And it was sort of like a roller coaster from there. I was still working in finance at the time. And was working in finance, and then on the weekends baking cookies at my commercial kitchen. And then I had a team who had like a station wagon, and they would deliver my cookies to Whole Foods on Monday mornings. And that was really the beginning and how it started. By the following year, I had actually expanded from just 3 Whole Foods in New York to 2 full regions of the Northeast and North Atlantic region. At that point, baking by hand was impossible. That was no longer a viable solution. So I moved over to a commercial facility in New Jersey, and we are still baking there. It was actually a manufacturer that was recommended to us by Whole Foods as being an excellent specialty cookie manufacturer. And we've been growing since then. We're now in, I believe, all 50 states, if not most states, including Alaska and Hawaii. We're in local stores, like your local natural specialty stores, but we're also now in Walmart on the East Coast, and we're going to be in H-E-B and Kroger come January. So we're really growing fast and furious. And then this year, which I think we're going to talk about today, we've launched 3 baking blends for our customers who don't just love our cookies, but want to come home and be able to bake anything, cookies, cakes, pancakes, anything they want. They want to be able to do it and do it really well, which is the technology and the innovation that we've created as a company. That's it.
Wow, that's such a great story. Spend years trying to get a meeting like that. So that sounds
I
fantastic.
know.
Yeah, it's
I
called
know.
Great Intervention. Wow. Love it. So obviously it's been, to get a product like this, you've got to do a lot of trial and error and, come up with new products all the time. So what are some of your challenges and what were some of the victories? What was the
Sure.
hardest thing and what was the
Oh,
best?
everything. Everything is hard. Everything. There's nothing. People ask me if I like what I do, and I absolutely love it. I feel like I loved working in finance. I love money. I love people. I love my clients. I love talking about money. It's something I'm passionate about, but I feel like my life didn't start like my life was kind of a dream back then, and now I'm like actually living it. Like I just feel alive. It's like the greatest
Yeah.
thing. But I also tell people, in addition to enjoying it, being a small business owner is like getting kicked in the face every single day. everything.
I was
Like,
just
it's
telling my
unbelievable what can go wrong. And if it can go wrong, it does go wrong, right? Like, I came from a world where you couldn't make an error ever to like it's raining out and their cardboard boxes got wet in the 2 feet between the truck and the loading dock. Everything got wet and all of your displays are now ruined. And I'm like, how does that happen? There's literally like a 12-inch gap between the truck and the loading dock, and it ruined like that kind of stuff is just insane. It happens all the time. But I would say the hardest thing in launching the business is really finding the right partners. And I get asked as a woman all the time, like, what are your advice for women? And it's not like rocket science. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, your partners are what are going to make you succeed. I spent most of my life as an individual contributor, and most jobs, you're an individual contributor for most of the job until maybe you're a manager, or a very senior manager, and you're dependent on teams. But the second you start a business, you are no longer an individual contributor. You are dependent on everyone from your employees to your suppliers to your distributors to everyone marketing to your retailers. They're all your partners. And if you don't have those right partnerships in place, you are not going to be successful. And that became even more complicated for me because gluten-free is really not done well. So finding someone not only that wanted to partner with me, but believed in me, but also had the capability to manufacture a product to my standards was very, very hard. I was
yeah,
very lucky in the beginning that Whole Foods believed in my product and they were like, go talk to this manufacturer. He is a specialty cookie manufacturer. He's not a cookie manufacturer. He is a specialty cookie manufacturer. I met with him and he was probably the fifth manufacturer I'd worked with at that point, had been through this sort of like, I can't sell this product. You can't make it. Like, I'm not selling that. It's terrible.
yeah.
He really believed in the product and he makes millions of cookies a day. And if we're doing a production run, he even like at lunchtime, I'll go into his office and he'll have my cookies sitting there because he eats them. Like, he's not gluten-free or vegan and he makes millions of cookies a day. But on my production day, my cookies are the ones he's eating, which I take as an extreme compliment. So I found the right manufacturing partner. I've now found the right distributors and just finding someone who believes in you and is willing to work really hard to get the product to the quality that it needs to be. That was the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Gluten-free baking is very tricky. When I was talking to my manufacturer, he's been doing this for decades. He's a certified food scientist. He's a Columbia MBA. He really knows his stuff. He's like, most people come in here, Carolyn, and they have a gluten-free product, and it just won't run through the machine. He goes, it tastes great. They can make it at home, but there's a huge jump going from making it, 24 1-ounce cookies to making 600 pounds of cookie dough at once. And you're trying to manufacture that. You have to put it into a hopper all at once. And all of that force and friction has to then produce a cookie that's 1 ounce. And if the dough isn't strong enough and the flour isn't robust enough, it just won't run through the machine. So you're dead on arrival, like even though you can't manufacture at that point. So there's all this technical manufacturing requirements to make a great product that a lot of manufacturers honestly aren't interested in. Right? They're like, it's too hard. I have to clean my machinery. I have to have all these protocol in place. It's a smaller segment of the market. And then we have to throw away dough because it doesn't work and they just won't work with you. And so that's sort of one of the reasons why you have a lot of convergence within the gluten-free market, where if you go and you buy a bunch of gluten-free products, they'll have totally different branding, totally different packaging. But when you open them and put them on the table, they'll all sort of look similar. That's because there's really only a few manufacturing facilities in the United States that make gluten-free products. And so anyone who goes to work with those facilities is going to be put into their process, be put into their supply chain, be put into their operations, and the products are going to all come out looking similar. So I had to find a partner who wasn't one of those guys, but that was also willing to work with me and was really passionate about cookies. And that was the hardest part. It's still hard. It's still